Mobile has always been a separate kingdom of its own making. Not quite North America, not quite the South, not anything that behaves the way it's supposed to. It learned early on how to live with contradictions, how to let folly chase death through the streets and call it civic order. If you grew up watching that every year, you don't confuse seriousness with truth later on. You learn to read symbols instead. Fire, masks, music. Who moves where, and who pretends not to notice. That was already true in 1926. That year, Mardi Gras Day, also known as Shrove Tuesday, fell on February 16th. The calendar, it may have shifted, but the city had not. It still understood itself as ritual first, spectacle second. Mary Louise Bartee, she stood inside it. She had been born into absence, not poverty, not neglect, absence, the kind that leaves space around a person where others expect someone living to stand. Her parents, George Bartee and Cecilia Cleveland Bartee, were gone too early. Her life was shaped by two unmarried aunts, Alabama and Miranda Cleveland. They believed in posture and restraint, and also by a retired sea captain who came ashore not for ease, but for duty. Captain Washington Jefferson Frisbee, lovingly known as Cappy, a man who had crossed oceans and learned late that staying put for a child required way more courage than leaving port ever did. He sent her to Barton Academy, then to Sullins College in Bristol, Virginia, to finish what Mobile had already marked as its own. At Barton, she was called Pat, not by her family, not by her knight, by a boy who watched more than he spoke, Leo. Mobile was small then, just over 60,000 souls, small enough that everyone knew one another's grandparents, old enough that no one entered a room without being measured against memory. People didn't meet later. They grew up together. They aged into positions together. Mary Louise lived with her aunts on Jackson Street. In 1919, her grandfather, George Huggins Cleveland's body, lay in the main parlor. Conrad Armbrecht came home from Georgia Tech, solemn beyond his years. Liz Armbrecht was already watching everything. Bill Armbrecht was still young enough to be ushered away with her, where children were sent during funerals. Those rooms taught who would later hold power quietly. The infant mystics rolled on February 15th, 1926. They're the last great night parade before Mardi Gras Day, one of the oldest, one of the most watched, a parade that belonged as much to memory as to motion. Fire was thrown upward into the dark, flambeaux lighting the way they always had, carried by hand, floats pulled by horses and mules, parades dependent on muscle and will, a city well practiced in making its own. Mary Louise stood at street level, flames casting light and shadows onto her gown. Camellias bloomed and decorated the season that year. In Spring Hill, Parents kept them like an orchard. Cousin Ulysses Lee Cleveland trimmed heavy camellia blossoms for decorations, when imported flowers were still rare, when timing mattered and local knowledge counted. She knew what float carried Jerome. He knew she would stand on the south side at Jackson and Government Street. Her knight for the season, masked, elevated, assigned. Jerome was new money, but not careless money. His father was a doctor and a real estate man, senior enough to sit high that night. Committee work, float work, visibility earned quickly and watched closely. Jerome rode because of that visibility. Mary Louise watched his float approach. She knew its angle. She knew the pause. When Jerome lifted his arms, the beads cut clean through the firelight. She reached. So did a lanky boy beside her. Arms stretched too far. Eagerness outrunning position. Leo was taller, 6'2" by then. He caught the beads just above the boy's fingertips, fingers closing without flourish. Then he turned and handed them to her. "Pat," he said, not loud, not claiming, just familiar. The float moved on. Jerome was already receding, attention pulled forward by motion and obligation. Mary Louise stood holding glass beads, uncertain where to place her gaze, toward the man elevated and departing, or the one beside her, grounded, present, already part of what the night would leave behind. Kathleen Dunn noticed. Kathleen from Evergreen, Mary Louise's guest, her friend from Sullins. Kathleen, who had never known her as Pat, leaned close and asked, not accusing, just curious, who was that man, and why did he call you Pat? Mary Louise did not answer right away. Later, in the ballroom, Kathleen noticed something else. Mary Louise kept touching the beads, fingertips testing the glass, as if to be sure they were real, or as if deciding which meaning they carried. The man who threw them, or the one who caught them? Mobile's Mardi Gras balls were never rigid affairs. After the tableau and first dance, the room loosened. Long tables gave way to motion. People drifted, like fish in an aquarium, circling, greeting the same faces from different angles. Dance cards open. The floor belonged to whoever stepped forward. Jerome danced once with her, proper, polite, observed. That was when Conrad appeared behind her chair. "Hello, Pat." She startled, champagne caught in her throat. Liz Armbrecht watched everything, the beads, the flinch, the half-beat of hesitation. Later she leaned in, voice light, eyes sharp. "Your cousin Lee has outdone himself with the flowers this year." A pause. Then, as casually as discussing the weather, "Was that Leo I saw at the parade tonight?" Mary Louise struggled to answer. Around them the old names moved as they always had. Cleveland, Aslava, Armbrecht, Leatherberry, men whose fathers had worked lumber, naval stores, and shipping. Women whose families held places on these same floors for generations. Leo danced with her later, not immediately, not in competition. He let the evening settle first. Let Jerome's proper turn complete itself. Let the orchestra change tempo. When he approached, he did not bow theatrically. He did not glance around to see who observed. He simply extended his hand. "May I?" Mary Louise hesitated only long enough to feel the beads again beneath her glove. Cool glass against silk. She placed her hand in his. On the floor he did not perform. He did not steer her sharply or crowd her space. He held her as if the music had already been decided between them. His hand at her back was steady, certain, not possessive, present. They moved easily. No urgency, no display, just ease. He did not look beyond her shoulder, did not scan the room for approval. He looked at her, not as Pat the schoolgirl, not as Mary Louise, the Cleveland name, simply at her. Kathleen watched from the table. She had seen Jerome's dance. It was correct, timed, observed by others. This was different. Mary Louise's posture shifted. Not the taut straightness her aunts insisted upon. That was always there. Something underneath, it softened. By the second turn across the floor, she was no longer dancing to be seen. She was dancing to be there. When the music slowed towards its close, they glided into the final measure without flourish. No dramatic dip, no lingering display, just a natural ending. Leo returned her to the table. He bowed, simple and respectful. "Thank you." His smile held something unguarded, not triumph, not as a claim, recognition. He stepped away. Kathleen leaned in. "I shall call you Pat forever now." Mary Louise gave her a look. "What makes you say that?" Kathleen tilted her head toward the floor where Leo had just stood. "You clutched those beads the moment he asked you to dance," she said softly, "and you forgot who threw them." Mary Louise's hand stilled. For a fraction of a second, she didn't answer. Across the room, Jerome was speaking with his father, observed, placed, properly aligned with the architecture of the evening. Leo stood nowhere in particular, laughing quietly at something someone said, unbothered by placement. Her aunts and Cappy were readying the house for the finale. By morning, their Jackson Street home would be Mardi Gras Central. The beads rested in her lap, and though no one had said it aloud, something had already shifted, not in spectacle, not in hierarchy, but in choice. Kathleen was right. From that night forward, she would answer most easily to Pat. 2 years later, she would marry Leo, but that night it was not prophecy. It was simply a dance. And in Mobile, that is often how the important things begin.